Hello everyone, my name is Trevor, I go by the Mr. Trails, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I wanted to go over why, if you want to get yourself a spot on the Dauntless leaderboards and get that golden crown, you should try and earn it in solos. No matter who you are in the Dauntless community, if you've been around a while, you will have no doubt been asked, or seen someone asking another person to help them get the gold crown, hence a top 100. For the many who have not put a lot of time and effort into doing trial attempts, they'll generally view the trials leaderboards as an unaccomplishable feat for one reason or another. It may be because they always see the same names on the leaderboard, it may be because they don't believe in their abilities to be able to perform at a high enough level, and in group trials especially when they see multiple names on the leaderboards multiple times, trying to find a way to develop your skill in the trials arena while trying to work around what would be referred to as gatekeeping can seem rather difficult. But for those who seek to put the time and effort into getting themselves a leaderboard time, at least from a solos perspective, can find relatively quick success with it. So today I'll be sharing with you guys a couple of stories of people getting their first top 100 solo trial. So let's take a look at my first week of competing for a top 100 spot on the Dauntless Trial leaderboard. I never had completed a Dauntless Trial in solos before, and the week's behemoth was one that many view as one of the toughest fights of all of them, Shroud, which on a side note was almost 6 months ago at this point. Like, come on Phoenix Labs, give me my Shadow Bird back. But since the trial was Shroud, I knew that there would be a relatively low amount of competition for the leaderboards. This is because many people, at least at the time, and maybe some still do, consider Shroud to be the hardest behemoth in the game, period. Where I myself didn't really mind fighting Shroud, so I knew it would be one of my best chances to get a top 100 time if I were to try hard enough. I had been back into Dauntless for less than a month at this point, and had gone through the struggles of grinding escalations with others around my skill level. I started to gain a bit of confidence in my ability to become a trial leaderboard player once I was rather consistently getting through entire escalations without being downed. For a couple of weeks prior, I had been seeing some of the top trial times on YouTube, and when Derperific posted his Shroud run, I knew there would be many things I could take away from it if I studied it enough. Taking his build and implementing the strategies he used, after a couple of days of trying, I was finally able to complete my first solo trial run, and it took me over 5 minutes. Clearly one of the main issues I was having was Derp's build had Predator, where I was consistently getting hit and losing out on the damage from it, and now looking back at that kind of a time, it seems like I probably had issues hitting the thing at all. But I didn't let this relatively slow start discourage me. I took the time to learn more things about the behemoth itself, such as when the interrupt occurs and how to properly position myself throughout the fight to trigger certain attacks. Even if I was going to struggle with getting all of the damage in properly, I knew I would still fail many more times. At least I was going to be learning more things about the game. A little while later, I lowered my time to a 420. Blaze it. I then tried experimenting with builds to help me more consistently finish the fight, even when I knew I was going to be getting hit. But I didn't want to be using Iceborne, as I felt like it wasn't going to help me in accomplishing my goal. So I ran this build. Grabbing Molten would make it so I didn't die if I got hit due to the combustion mod, and I would be able to heal a few times and stay in the fight. Looking back now, this build was rather cringe, but it did accomplish its goal of teaching me more things and keeping me alive. Helpful it was or not, one thing was absolutely certain, that I was determined to get myself on the leaderboard. Much later in the next day, I got the time even lower, down to a 3:33. Seeing that I was close to a sub 3 by myself, I was very hopeful. The next day, I had my first sub 3, a 2:25, which when I got it was around 60th on the leaderboard. I knew that I probably would need a better time if I was going to stay on the leaderboard for the end of the week. So I kept at it, and the day after I got myself a 2:05, which was good enough to keep me on the leaderboard till the end. And I wanted to share this initial journey with you guys because maybe some of you are like I was at the time. Because even though I had not completed a trial by myself before that week, through spending a bit of time grinding both my mental and mechanical skills in the game, I achieved a top 100 I was looking for. But that was just my experience. I do have a couple more solo trial stories for you guys, just in a little bit less detail since I was not the one doing them. Both of these players have a similar story in how they got their first top 100 in solos. Our first example, RG, reached out to me through Discord a couple weeks after the Shroud trial, inquiring about whether I or people I know regularly grind trials for leaderboards. He had probably asked more people than just myself, and at that point probably concluded that solos were going to be an easier time for him to get the top 100. Only the week before, he had put some attempts into solo trials and missed the leaderboard by about 6 seconds. He wanted to get my thoughts on what a good time for the week would be versus the Stormclaw, another behemoth that a lot of people consider to be quite challenging. I believe the cutoff for the leaderboard on this particular trial was a 114. He decided to do some attempts attempts without tonics to help him, and he was able to get a 142, and he was feeling good about his chances of making the leaderboards for the week. But after a few days, he only had a 121 with potions, and although he was on the leaderboard at that point, he wanted to keep going as he was unsure if it was going to stay to the end. In that time, I had decided to put a few attempts in myself, and I was able to get a 101 at this point, so I gave him some insights about the execution of the strategy. After struggling with the strategy a little bit and some extra tips from me over the next couple of days, he was able to secure a 1-minute time, beating what I had said myself. Our other example, D.O., hadn't been on the trial scene for all too long. For the month prior to his top 100, he had been asking for assistance in the trials. And then comes the Dauntless trial, what would appear to be the first trial he was able to deal with solo. For several days, he was struggling to get his time down. He started off around 1 minute and 40-second times, and a couple days later progressed into the 120s. A confused soul, thinking crits were all that stood between him and a 1-minute time, I offered to send him an in-depth breakdown of Helltrix's run of the trial. I taught him about how many of the trials have an AI manipulation element before you even step foot in the ring, how important it was that his Titan's crashes are in an overpower state, and how extreme part focus is required at the higher levels of play. Only a couple of hours after checking out my advice to him, he was able to net himself a 109. However, I believe the cutoff for this trial was a 103 or a 102, so he needed to go out and perform even better. Or just crit harder, forehead. After a lot of attempts, and a few days later, he shows me his 101 on the leaderboard at the end of the week. And all of this grind and determination came from D.O. after I had told him that he shouldn't bother chasing a top 100 time for that week, as the Dauntless trial was rather easy. An easy trial generally means plenty of competition, as is rather evident from this week's Malkarian trials. So there are some examples for you guys about how a few players got their gold crown doing it as a solo player. And these solo players were doing it very early in their life cycle of trials. You had myself, who had only been playing groups for about a couple of weeks. You had RG, who got it in his second week of solo trial attempts, him and I achieving it against some of the toughest behemoths in the rotation. And you have D.O., who for the month prior had been calling on some really heavy assistance just to get a sub 3. But then he goes out and gets himself a top 100 in one of the most competitive trials of the cycle. Hence, 2 examples on a harder behemoth and another example on an easy behemoth. Conveniently enough, this video is going to be posted during the Malkarian trials, where some people who haven't gotten a top 100 can get a top 5, given that you're willing to immerse yourself in the carpal tunnel. Maybe these stories may motivate some of you guys to go out and try to get yourself a top 100 in solos. And if you guys find yourselves struggling with a particular trial and need some pointers on how to make the strategies work, feel free to ask me on Discord to break down the trial for you. And that's the kind of trial assistance I like to offer, is giving people tips on how to actually improve their skills at the game in solos. And at some point there will be a video on the channel where I will break down the differences between a top 5 run, a top 10 run, and a top 100 run. So if you enjoy Dauntless content and you want to see something like that, consider subscribing to the channel where I post Dauntless content every week. And if you guys enjoyed the video and the stories of these solo trials, consider leaving a like. But I've been Trevor, I go by the Mr. Trails, and I will catch you guys next time.